today's how-to video, I'm going to show you guys how to do an end-to-end splice using a Mobius Brummel splice or a locking splice to create an incredibly strong splice in your Dyneema line. So this is especially useful if the piece of line you have just isn't long enough and you need to make it a little longer. This will make it reach. You can use this to add line, and the best part is the transition is completely smooth. So this will still flow through shivs, blocks, pulleys, anything you need to feed it through. It'll run through without a problem because there's no bulky knot, there's no obstruction, and there's no problem. Let's take a look at how you make this splice. It's super easy. You only need a couple tools. You need fids, you need a pusher, and a sharp knife. So the situation's simple. You have two separate lines that you want to attach. Now they're identical in diameter, so they're the same size. You just want to attach them to make your line longer. So first off, you could always just tie a knot in them, and then it's connected. You're done. Unless you have a situation where you can't have the bulk of a knot. Because if you have a bulky knot, it can't run through blocks and pulleys and shivs and sheaves and everything else. So in those cases, what you need is to splice the line. You need an end-to-end splice, so that way the lines simply connect to each other and everything works perfect and smooth. So it's very important that both lines are the exact same diameter. So in this case, I'm working with a 6mm line. The only math you need to do when you're splicing Dyneema is to know the diameter of the line, and then you're going to multiply that diameter in millimeters by 72. So 6mm times 72 gives you 432 millimeters. And if you're in the States and want to know in inches, you're going to divide that by 25.4. And that tells you that you need to have 17 inches of line buried. So the only measurement you need to do is to measure out 17 inches of the line. With that measurement, everything else follows. The way we're going to attach the two lines is going to be with a locking end-to-end splice. So this uses the Mobius Brummel splice, but done end-to-end. You just need to measure out your 17 inches, and then you take a fid, and you open the weave of the line, and you pass the fid through. Now you're going to take the other end of the line that you're connecting, of your two lines, and you simply pull it through. So with a Mobius Brummel splice, one line passes through the other, and then the first line, the one that got passed through, is going to pass through the other line. And what you're going to do is create a lock. And then you just bury the tails and everything is done. So same as before, we just push the weave open, feed our fid right through the weave, and then we take the other end of the line that we're splicing together, just feed it through. So to do this, you do need access to the ends of the lines. They can't be far off and everything. They have to be accessible to you to work. So if you're splicing together some really long lines, be prepared for a lot of feeding through. So now we have the two tails, and then we have the standing parts which come out. And if you notice, when we pull really hard, nothing happens. It's locked even though there isn't even any line buried. So when we bury it, what that does is it takes the stress off of this point. So the way the locking splice works is, as you can see, the lines simply pass through each other twice. So this line comes through and passes through this one, and then this one passes through this one. So they just overlap each other, and then when you pull, they lock, but if you pull in the other direction, they come apart. And that's the important part. So you need to make sure that when you do the splice, you do them in the proper orientation, so that way it locks and it holds. And the best way to test that is to test it by actually pulling on it. If when you pull on the standing parts and not the tails, so when you pull on the standing parts, it's going to lock. When you pull on the tails, it's going to open. If it does that, you're good to go to the next phase. If it doesn't do that, and it locks when you pull the tails, and opens when you pull the standing part, then you did this backwards and you have to do it again. Now's the easy part. We're simply going to open this weave, and we're going to feed this tail all the way through. at this point, you have the splice. So that goes through beautifully. And then you have the tails running all the way in, all along. We haven't tapered them yet, which is why we cannot put them back into the core. If you bury them into the core at this point, you're going to have to dig them out, and it's just going to be horrible to do that. So that's why you don't want to bury it in all the way. You just want to make sure that it can bury, and it's about to go in, so you know that after you taper everything, it will go in all the way. So at this point, you're just going to pull it out, and we're going to taper the tail. All you're going to do is you're going to pull it back as far as you can, and then you're just going to count how many little strands you have running in one single direction all the way across from front to back. And then you're going to divide that by 11, and that's going to tell you how many strands you need to skip before you pull out the next one for the taper. So it's a little bit tedious, but let's get started. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 39, 40, 41, 42. So 42, let's just call it 44, just because it's so close. So that means that every fourth strand, you're going to pull it out and cut it off. And that's going to be your taper. Now, when you're working with smaller lines, it's easier to do this because you have a smaller tail. When you're working with a bigger line where you're burying feet and your tail is several feet long, you're going to be counting really far, like well into the hundreds. And it's best not to have anyone come over and talk to you, because if they do, you have to start again. So every fourth, we're going to pull it out and cut it off. We'll pull that out, and then we just cut them off. Now when you're tapering, you don't have to cut from the exact same strand each time, because if you do, you're just going to end up with 6 strands cut off from this side, and then the other 6 going the other direction, just hanging limp. So you want to alternate which side you're cutting from. So you can see after we've tapered, it goes from being full thickness and just runs all the way down to being just a single strand. So that's why you only need to count and divide your number by 11, because you're only cutting 11 strands. So this is strand number 12, because Dyneema is 12 strands. So strand number 12 stays full length, and that's strand 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, all the way down until you cut off the last strand that you're going to be cutting. So this is a properly tapered core, and we're going to milk that back into the line. So milking is really simple. So keep your eye looking here and also looking here. So as I pull on the cover, you see the tail goes being pulled right back into the rope. If you rub your hand all along this, you will not feel where it transitions from being double, so an outer and an inner line, all the way to somewhere in this area, where, actually right here, where there is no more splice, and it is just the outer line. You cannot feel the transition, and that means that the fibers that run on this outer line, that run along and start getting bigger and bigger and bigger as they go covering the inner core, they have no sharp bends. So if we, just for academic reasons, this side is properly tapered, let's not properly taper this side. We'll just milk it in, and we'll see what happens there. So if we look, you can see the line comes along. It's really thick, and then all of a sudden it just steps down. And that step is what's going to break. So what happens is the fibers are running along, and then real quick they have a sharp bend and then another sharp bend as they come out and then go over. And right there, this line is going to get stressed and break. If you look at this one for comparison, you see it's nice and smooth. It just tapers down, where this one, it just goes from all to nothing. And that's the problem, and that is what you cannot have. Now in the comments, someone told me, cut the line and then pull it from this side. That way you don't mess up the tail, so it doesn't come unraveled. My problem is I don't know which one to pull for this one. Like, I know if I pull here, it'll show itself, and then I'll have it. Oh, didn't actually cut it all the way. I know if I pull here it'll show itself, so I can kind of hold the end and give it a tug and see which one gives, but I honestly don't know which one to pull from at the end. So if you guys have any suggestions on how to figure out which one you're actually pulling after you cut it over here, please let me know, because I don't know that trick. So now it is properly tapered. So when we milk it back in, disappears. And now it tapers from double thickness with the outer cover and the inner core all the way to just the outer cover. There's no step, no gap. This little bend here is from when I tried to force it open again to get the core out. So it's nice and smooth. There's no gaps, no steps. Everything is tapered and even. And this is just as strong as your original line. So if you ever need to make your Dyneema line just a little longer or even a lot longer, or it got cut and now you need to attach the two to put it back together, this is how you do it. This is the strongest kind of end-to-end splice that you can do in Dyneema. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends.
And if you'd like to follow our journey in real time on a map, receive postcards from our ports of call, and message us directly to the boat, you can go ahead and become a patron using the link in the description down below.